Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So we have so quickly gone through the first month of 2024, and I was able to get through 5 full-length novels, no novellas here, no nonfiction, no short story collections, like actual concrete horror novels this month. I was hoping to get through 6, but I did go on vacation to Savannah and I didn't read at all when I was there, so it made it a little bit harder for me to get through a full 6 novels, but I tried. So I have 5 here for you guys. They're kind of all over the place when it comes to ratings. I have some pretty low ones. I have a really high one. I've got a couple 4 stars. So very, very, very excited to dive into this wrap up. So first up, I have The Woodkin by Alexander James. It says anything can happen on the trail. I do want to highlight that this is a Twisted Retreat limited edition printing. This is a truly, truly, truly beautiful book. And unfortunately, it kind of stops there. It kind of stops there. I really wanted to love this book. I thought the premise was really, really cool. I thought the book was stunning. I typically tend to like the Twisted Retreat books more than I dislike them. This one really spoke to me when I first saw the premise. And to be perfectly honest, the first quarter to a third of the book I really, really enjoyed. We kind of got to the halfway point and things started to really, really fall apart. The twist for me, I kind of suspected a little too early on, and I just didn't really care about our main character too much, and I didn't love the explanation of what was happening. I felt like it was a little all over the place. I'm going to read the inside flap, or I'm going to read the back of the book though, so you guys know what this story is about. After secrets and betrayal shatter his marriage, Josh Mallory seeks solace on the Pacific Crest Trail in the mountains of Washington. On the trail, he's just another hiker. On the trail, he can outrun the memories. But his backpacking trip swiftly turns grisly when he comes across the body of another hiker, who seems to have fallen to his death. Josh is forced to detour through a small mountain town where missing hiker posters clutter the windows and the residents show no interest in hearing about the dead hiker. Unease that something is not quite right chases him back to the trail. But night falls too quickly, and in his haste to get away, Josh becomes trapped on a mountain ridge beneath the light of a full moon. Feeling more and more uneasy, Josh soon realizes that he may not be alone on the mountain, and begins to fear that, like the missing hikers, he won't make it out alive. So, for fans of Adam Neville, you may enjoy this book. There are a lot of qualities in this novel that remind me a lot of The Ritual and a lot of The Reddening. There is some, I don't want to say cult, but there is some kind of folklorish cult thing going on. It's definitely an interesting way to do that kind of storyline. However, this book just gave me so many unanswered questions, and I just didn't understand the connection between our cult and this mysterious town that our hiker stumbles upon. I felt like there was a large disconnect in explanations. I felt that there was a large disconnect in the created mythology. I just felt like a lot of this book wasn't forward enough in telling me what was going on, and on top of that, I can't say I enjoyed our character. Our lead is made to be very, very, we're supposed to feel sorry for him, we really are, but he kind of also acts like he is owed everything in life. And there was just something about his characterization that rubbed me the wrong way, and I don't think it was meant to come off that way, but I just couldn't get behind our main character. There was just something about him that I didn't connect with, and it made me very hard to sympathize with him in kind of his horrific predicament. There is some very scary imagery in this story. Props to that. I thought the setting was very interesting and very unique. It does a very good job of capturing the vibe of the Oregon Trail. I read Briardark last year, which is a very similar setting, and I really felt like I was in the woods with these characters. And again, when we first start off the book, and it really is just our lead, Josh, kind of walking around and hiking, and kind of discovering odd things, I was absolutely about it. And then it kind of takes this really bizarre turn right before like the halfway point, I feel, and I just couldn't connect with it anymore. I felt like it really did a full 180 in tone and writing and characterization and description, and it just started to feel very, very flat and soulless for me. So this was a 2-star read. I really did want to like it, but if you were interested in like folk horror and you are fans of kind of the more extreme side of Adam Neville's folk tales, you might enjoy this one. Unfortunately, I did not, and it will probably end up on my Pango books in the near future. I'm going to be listing a couple books on there very, very soon. So if you follow me on Pango Books, I will be selling some books for pretty cheap soon. Next up, I do have a whole video review on this, and this is Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. Now, I will not be reading the inside flap of this book because I do not want any spoilers for anybody who hasn't read My Heart is a Chainsaw, as this is the sequel to My Heart is a Chainsaw, which was one of my favorite books of, I believe, 2021. I am typically not a Stephen Graham Jones fan. I say this every single time I talk about Stephen Graham Jones on my channel, but My Heart is a Chainsaw kind of came to me through like an ARC. I read it. I loved it. I was stunned that I loved it. So I did pick up the sequel. It is a very, very strong sequel. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I unfortunately don't feel like it lived up to the original story. I feel like some of the things that made me love the first book were a little absent in this. Our main character, Jade, I am obsessed with. I think she is one of the like most relatable characters in horror lit. For me personally, I just find her just such a realistic depiction of like an outcast teenage girl who loves horror and especially horror movies. And I love like the reverence that Stephen Graham writes that character with. I love how Stephen Graham Jones is able to use these kind of crazy, horrific, over-the-top slasher stories to also have these really crucial kind of subtle conversations about modern-day feminism in his books. My Heart is a Chainsaw and Don't Fear the Reaper both do that. They touch on different topics both times while focusing on different female leads to lead that conversation, if that makes sense. But if you have never read the My Heart is a Chainsaw or the Indian Lake series, I'm not a series person, but I do highly recommend these. I think they're very, very, very fun, really whimsical, really just love letters to the horror genre as a whole. And I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. This was a 4-star read. My Heart is a Chainsaw, I believe, was a 5. I really, really loved that book, and I went into it thinking I wasn't going to like it at all, and it really just changed my mind on a lot of things Stephen Graham Jones-esque. I am very pleased to say that this follows in that vein, and doesn't kind of hold on to that like gonzo style of writing that Stephen Graham Jones is so well known for, that kind of like slice of life style, like almost portraiture in writing that he does in things like Night of the Mannequins and Mongrels, and probably most famously The Only Good Indians. So yeah, if you weren't a fan of those, you might actually enjoy the Chainsaw series. I'm going to leave it at that because I've been talking about this series on my channel a little bit too heavily. If you really want to know my thoughts, I do have videos on both the first book as well as this book to really give you guys a deep dive. But this was a 4-star read. Didn't live up to the first one, but didn't disappoint me at all. So definitely worth checking out. Okay, next up, I have Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. Now, I do also have a full-length review of this book on my channel. I'm going to read the back of the book real quick. So it says, when Krista joins a tour group heading deep into the Rocky Mountains, she's hopeful this will be her chance to put the ghosts of her past to rest. But when a bitterly cold snowstorm sweeps the region, the small group is forced to take shelter in an abandoned hunting cabin. Despite the uncomfortably claustrophobic quarters and rapidly dropping temperature, Krista believes they'll be safe as they wait out the storm. She couldn't be more wrong. Deep in the night, their tour guide goes missing, only to be discovered the following morning, his severed head impaled on a tree outside the cabin. Terrified and completely isolated by the storm, Krista finds herself trapped with 8 total strangers. One of them kills for sport, and they're far from finished. As the storm grows more dangerous and the number of survivors dwindles one by one, Krista must decide whom she can trust before this frozen mountain becomes her tomb. So I said this in my review video, but Darcy Coates is one of my favorite authors. She's an author that I pretty much instantly buy whatever she has coming out. So that being said, I have a level of standards for Darcy Coates that is probably much higher than an author who I am reading for the first time. I think this is the 14th book I've read by Darcy Coates. So I judge her a lot more harshly because I really know what she can do and how she can impress me. This book for me is kind of in like the average realm for Darcy Coates. I gave this 3 stars because I have read more enjoyable books from her. I have read more put together, more fleshed out, more complete books from her. My 2 biggest issues with this were, 1, I saw the twist in this novel coming a mile away. Dare I say, like, page 10. Like, I really saw the twist coming in this novel, and I hate that. I want to be blindsided by twists. I want them to really creep up on me and almost come out of nowhere. I don't want to be able to predict the story from the beginning. And 2, I absolutely hated our main character. This is a novel filled with very, very interesting characters. And yet we focus on the most boring of those characters. We also focus on a character who I feel like doesn't deserve what happens to her. I feel like that's kind of this overarching theme for all of the characters involved. Like, none of them deserve what's happening to them, but I feel like the way that Darcy Coates sets this up, like, not only does our main character not deserve what's happening for them because they're already so racked with guilt and shame and just sadness and a kind of crappy life leading up to where they are, but I feel like our secret killer knows that. And so it just felt hard for me to understand the motivation of our killer apart from the fact that they just are crazy, you know, and like hellbent on doing something awful, which I guess is a kind of realistic component when you get to like crazy serial killers, but there is a driving motive because this is a horror novel. But it was just hard for me to connect with our main character because I found her very annoying, I found her very unlikable, and I found her very dumb and very much okay to risk the safety of others for her own personal needs, and then kind of frame it as this idea of her doing the right thing to justify her endangering other people, and then kind of having like no remorse for that. I don't know, I didn't love her, and again, I saw the twist coming from a mile away, so it was hard for me to get into this book understanding that I had figured out what was going to happen. And then as the book went on, it just kind of really reaffirmed that I knew what was going to happen. However, I love that Darcy Coates is stepping slightly away from cozy horror and really kind of going there. Like, this novel is probably the most unrelenting novel she has written. It is very gory. It is very horrific in what happens. And it is an extreme for Darcy Coates. She kind of touched on that when she wrote From Below the year prior, but I felt like this really leaned into it. There's not necessarily happy endings. It's not, all of the characters don't survive. In fact, most don't. This is a true slasher, in a sense, from Darcy Coates, and she really committed to it, and I really appreciate her kind of opening her boundaries and kind of writing in ways that we haven't seen from her yet. And she's not doing it perfectly quite yet. She's mastered cozy horror. She has not mastered the murder mystery. But she's getting there, and I really appreciate that she is trying. So this was a 3-star read for me. If you enjoy Darcy Coates as a whole, you will enjoy this. Just because it's a 3-star for me does not mean it's a bad book. It's just not the standard I expect from Darcy Coates, but I still read it really, really quickly. I think I read the last, like, half of it in like a day or two. She's doing a good job, and she's doing something new for her, and I really appreciate that, because we can't always just have the cozy haunted house story over and over and over again, as much as I love those. So very happy to see her pushing her boundaries. 3 stars. Read this if you're a fan of Darcy Coates, or if you want a really cool wintry setting. The setting in this novel is top-notch. It is so chilling, it is so isolating, it is so well done. And it kind of reminds me of Yellow Jackets a little bit. So the setting, the like new world for Darcy Coates, and the fact that it just is Darcy Coates' writing makes this book absolutely worth reading, even though it's not my favorite thing that she has put out thus far. So yes, 3 stars for that. But next up, I have Silent Key by Laurel Hightower, and I also do have a full in-depth review on this. I'm going to read the back of the book for this as well. After the loss of her husband under mysterious circumstances, former NYPD detective Cam Ambrose learns how little she truly knew him. Determined to understand her husband's double life, Cam finds herself face to face with truths she never wanted to uncover, while struggling to keep her young daughter safe from a world of the supernatural she never knew existed, and from the haunting that has already destroyed so many lives. With the help of a recluse neighbor, Cam learns her husband's mysteries went far deeper than she ever imagined. Hostile ghosts, long-dead sailors, and a madman willing to do anything to bring back his own family all threaten to push Cam over the edge, till she ends up in the one place she fears the most. Some ghosts just won't die. So I really go pretty in-depth on my thoughts in this book in my standalone review, so I'll keep this pretty brief. The two big takeaways for me with this novel is, one, this is such a misleading cover. This is not underwater horror. There's very, very little underwater horror in this story. But it does focus around a sort of aquatic adjacent storyline. I'm just gonna kind of keep it there. But this is a haunted house story. This is a very, very unique haunted house story. This is a very distinctive take on the concept of like an imprint haunting. And I've never seen something like this done before. I found it extremely original, extremely creative. And because of the world that Laurel Hightower sets up with this haunting, I found it very, very scary in theory. I wouldn't quite call this a scary book because not a lot happens. It's very much a talking forward book, talking to kind of forward the plot and the narrative. So very, very minor action, and it's very, very centered on like one location, being this small town that everything takes place in Texas, and not necessarily the haunted house. So you kind of have to be wary of that going forward. My biggest complaint, but also my biggest compliment when I read Laurel Hightower, and this is now with both books that I've read from her, is I really love her concepts, but they always leave me wanting more. I want more answers, I want more descriptions, I want more in this world, in this setting, with these characters. And I feel like her books are always too short for that. I talked about how much I enjoyed her novella Below, and the kind of general consensus from a lot of people watching that was how everybody kind of wanted it to be a full-length novel and not a novella. This easily could have been an extra 40 pages, and I would have happily read it. I just felt like I needed more from it. I feel like this book kind of sets itself up for a sequel, so that might happen, and we might be getting more. But overall, I enjoyed the uniqueness of this haunting, but really needed it more fleshed out for me. This is another story where I can't say I love our main character. I found her very, very selfish, very, very self-centered. Ooh, sorry, I had to go answer my door. But no, as I was saying, I find this character to be very self-centered, not in the same way that our Darcy Coates lead was, not necessarily in a kind of misguided into thinking they're doing the right thing, but more in a driven for one purpose and one purpose only at like the cost of everything else. I kind of talk about this in my longer review, but one of the things that really bothered me about this is our main character really characterizes herself as this kind of single mom who's had it very, very tough because she is now suddenly a single mom and wants to put her daughter's safety above everything else, and yet constantly is just leaving this child with anybody who will watch her. At one point, she's even dropping the kid off, I believe, with the town's sheriff for like a whole afternoon. Like, I just found this woman to be so absent in her child's life, and therefore putting not only herself in danger, but ignoring her child to serve her own purposes when she didn't need to. And I've just found that mischaracterization to be really confusing to the overall narrative of this story and what Laurel Hightower was trying to present to us. So this was a 4-star read. It did kind of teeter on a 3-star read, but I think overall I really give Laurel Hightower points for the original concept that went into this. Again, an imprint haunting is something that I feel like we hear about but don't necessarily read about in horror lit. It's something that is more a concept in like supernatural elements in reality. It's what you hear about on like ghost hunters and don't necessarily see in stories, because an inactive ghost isn't quite as cool as a ghost who is actually like moving stuff. I thought Laurel Hightower did a really interesting job of taking an imprint haunting and making it work to drive a plot forward and kind of serve a purpose and kind of have a different way that it can function with our characters in their own reality. I really, really enjoyed that. I thought it was a very, again, unique concept that I haven't seen done before, and for that it definitely gets a 4-star. And I really do love Laurel Hightower's voice. I find her narrative really compelling and really easy to read, and she writes very, very short chapters, so you're just constantly go with her stories, and I really, really enjoy her writing overall. Even if I didn't love the story to its fullest extent, I still think it was a solid 4-star read and definitely worth checking out. Okay, and last but not least, I don't think I need to read the premise of this book, because I'm sure if you are on this channel, you know the premise of this story. But I finally read, I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, Ira Levine's Rosemary's Baby. I adore the film. I adore the film. I was really excited to read the book. I will be making vodka blushes for my channel very, very soon, but I had to read the book to just make sure that my concept for them aligns with the book, and it does. I have so much to say about the vodka blush. I loved this book. And one thing that I will say that I was really kind of blown away with is I read Silence of the Lambs after seeing the film, and I read Hellbound Heart after seeing Hellraiser. And with both of those books, I felt like I was put at a disadvantage for having seen the film adaptations first, just because they were so closely aligned with the film adaptations that I knew kind of what was coming. Nothing could there was no big twist, and the only things that I really hyper-focused on were like the slight changes between the book and the adaptation. And again, they're very, very slight. So those books, I feel like I didn't rate them as highly as I would have had I read them without knowing the story beforehand. So I was going in expecting this to be the same, and this really is word for word the film. And I know that Roman Polanski was under the impression that he had to make an extremely faithful adaptation to the novel. However, the novel just adds so much more depth to our characters, primarily Rosemary and her husband Guy, than you see in the film. And that's literally just time constraints. You get so much more inside Rosemary's head with this story without losing the story that I already knew and loved. And I appreciated this so much more. It was almost like having a podcast companion to the film, being inside Rosemary's head so much. And I adored this. I adored this. I also found it to be way more descriptive. It is very, very, very much a product of its time. This just screams 1960s New York. There were so many things that I was kind of like laughing at, like the prices of things are just like laughable compared to today. The like scenario with like the apartment lottery, and just there's so many aspects of this that just make it such a product of its times, and like the female norms and what's expected of them by being married to a husband, and just the amount of gaslighting that Rosemary undergoes during this entire ordeal is just heartbreaking. You feel so much more sympathy for her in the story than you do in the film. And not because the film doesn't portray it, it portrays it, but because you're so in her head in a way that you can't be with Mia Farrow, you just feel so much worse for her. And I will say, while the endings are very, very similar, the ending of the novel is much, much, much more poignant at driving home the conclusion, and it's just so heartbreaking in such a strange kind of compelling way, and the added details to that, and just like the kind of let the right one in paradox that you get with the ending of this book, where you're like, Is it a happy ending? Is it a sad ending? How do I interpret this ending? There's just so many levels to this story. And it is very, very subtle horror. You know it's horror because it's a famous, iconic horror novel. But I will say that, like, the true horror doesn't really come in until towards the very, very end. Most of the horror comes from just how awful Rosemary's husband is as a person. And as that story unravels, you kind of see him as the true villain of the story. And again, you definitely get that in the film, but it's just so much more detailed in the novel. And this was a true 5-star read for me. I'm probably going to do a whole video on this. Not really a review, because I don't really think I can review one of the greatest and most famous horror novels ever written. I think that already speaks for itself, but I do definitely want to talk about a lot of the reasons why I loved it and why I think it deserves to be as famous as it is today. And if you haven't seen the movie, oh my god, the movie is so good. It's also beautiful. It is such a beautiful, beautiful movie while just being depraved. So I adored this. This was my 5-star read, and I'm so happy. I read this in 3 days. I honestly probably could have read it in 2 days, but I had to sleep. So yes, definite 5 stars for me. Anyways, that is all that I have for my reading wrap up for the month of January. I have a whole stack of books here for February, and I should be getting the new Christopher Golden novel very, very soon, so I'm hoping to have that read next month as well. And as always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays, and if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah!